Evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Zoning Commission. Today's date is October 5th, 2022, and the time is 6:02. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask those present turn off their cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet upon the front table. I would like to take a moment to review the procedures that the commission will follow tonight. First, the commission will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. The planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendation. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you'd like to speak either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please first state your name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with your comments at all times. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicant may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff or public or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the commission. The commission shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the commission. The commission will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any commission member who has an ex parte communication to place in record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of the deliberation of their respective agenda items. With that being said, do we have any public comments on matters not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of August 22nd, 2000. This says 2002. I hope that's not what we're approving. 22. So do we have any additions or deletions on the minutes from August 22nd of 2022? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. Items of business. The first item of business is a public hearing zoning ordinance map amendment rezone from AP to GC proposal. Midwest Auto Properties, LLC. Curtis Epling. Dan, do you want to read the rest of the information into the record for us, please?
Yes. Curtis Epling of Midwest Auto Properties, LLC has filed an application for a zoning ordinance amendment rezone of the property as identified as parcel number 884701200009. This is located at 1605 Charles Avenue, a lot and address along the Highway 20 corridor. This is currently in the agricultural preservation zoning district. And the proposal is to switch over to the general commercial zoning district for the purpose of using the property for outdoor storage and eventually having a building for automotive repair. This proposal has been properly noticed in the Sioux City Journal's legal section on September 29, 2022. Neighbors within 1,000 feet have been duly notified via September 26, 2022 letter about tonight's special zoning commission meeting, October 5th, 2022, and a public hearing. And those have been requested to comment. As of September 21st, 2022, or as the printing of this packet, no comments or inquiries have been received about the proposal. Appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, organizations, have been notified and requested to comment. The county engineer has recommended for a pavement agreement to be signed, as the rezone has the potential to generate traffic. The parcel should participate in the cost of any future pavement to meet the needs of traffic at a new commercial enterprise. Neil Stockcliffe of the Woodbury County Soil Water Conservation District recommends against the rezoning proposal because a significant portion of the parcel lies in the flood zone, making it more prone to flood damages if it is developed as business property. Based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning and subdivision ordinance, the proposal does meet the criteria for approval with the ability to enforce the floodplain development regulations as per section 5.03 of the Woodbury County zoning ordinance. It is the recommendation of staff to approve the zoning ordinance map amendment rezone to the general commercial district with the condition that pavement agreements be signed for improvements to both 162nd Street and Charles Avenue. Okay. And just note that since this is a special meeting and the previous meeting schedule was postponed, that the packets in front of you have been updated to reflect the new legal that was posted on September 29th, 2022. As it pertains to the criteria for this particular rezone, it's important to point out that the land use future map that looks at the county's future use. This particular parcel is in that general commercial designation, which much of it is along the Highway 20 corridor there. So that this does fit with the general plan of Woodbury County for flipping that particular zoning district forward. And as was noted, any floodplain regulations or criteria can be governed thoroughly through the floodplain ordinances. So that's pretty much all I have. We do have traditionally the language of what the two pavement agreement would look like, beginning on page 11 of the packet. And of course, page 9 shows what the actual ordinance would look like.
Okay, so at this point in time, do we have any public comment on this item on our agenda? South side? Right. How far is it from the bypass? Is that what you're asking? Oh, I don't know. Do we have a pipeline route?
We don't really have an official, or we haven't received any type of application at this level.
So at this point in time, we're not aware of any pipeline route with this application? I guess. Okay. I guess that's probably in addition to another issue that we may have tonight. Does anybody have any information on that we're not aware of? Maybe? Commissioners?
This is just a rezone for this property here, I think that we're looking at tonight. So that won't even be, we aren't aware of any property sale parcel.
This is by the owners. If I understand, this is the owners trying to rezone this parcel from ag to general commercial.
Is that what you're here tonight for, is regarding the pipeline issue?
Yeah, we're interested.
Okay, this application that this individual came forward with strictly for rezone for their use. We've not been informed of any sale or anything that may be coming down the road.
It's already owned by this person.
So that's all we're looking at on this part of it.
It's already owned by
Yeah. Right.
Already owns the property, so it's not a sale contingent on anything.
And I can't speak on his behalf if he intends to sell it, but that's not anything that we can be aware of or this particular person.
Thank you. So with that in mind, do we have anything on, anybody on the phone?
We do not.
Okay. Any questions or comments for, we don't have a representative.
Yeah,
here for
I
this.
did speak to the applicant earlier today on the phone, and I thought they would be.
Deciding not to come in here. Okay, so do you want us to go into closed session for any discussion then?
That's up to you, to close the public hearing.
Do we feel like we need to close the public hearing at this point, or we?
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Okay, so motion and second, that carries. So do we have any questions or comments on this application?
I guess the only thing I'd have to add was Neil's comment from Woodbury County Soil and Water Conservation District with the regards to the floodplain. Dan already addressed that, and I do know, because in this is the area that will be in the floodplain on the future map will be even smaller than it is currently. And again, to Dan's comment that they'll still be able to regulate any building that may go on in that area, addresses Neil's concern. So that's all.
That property is quite a bit higher. I mean, you got the creek's down pretty low and you got the roadway before you get to this property.
Depending on the methods of construction, they may be building up the property.
You know, anything that would be built in compliance with the floodplain ordinance. You know, so.
Yeah, my only concern is that we don't have a representative here to be able to ask them that, do you understand the ramifications of being in a flood zone?
Yeah, and I have spoken with them. Actually, this application has been kind of in the hopper for some time. I believe they contacted me over a year ago, at least during the COVID timeframe. And so this application was not a new concept. It came in about August, and I had spoke to them about the imperativeness that they have the relationship with the DNR, contact them for the BFE and understand if that's not a floodway particular area. If things look good with the DNR, they would just have to know what the natural elevation is relative to the BFE and employ proper elevation standards. They're aware that there's a Loma, the Loma version of fill that somebody could use, or the typical elevation scenarios there. So I'm pretty confident that they're very well aware. They've worked with surveyors as well to have an understanding.
All right.
They would still be subject to floodplain development permits.
They didn't plant it this year, so they must have planned on doing something.
All right.
Beyond construction of a building, if he's using storage or anything like that, is there any floodplain regulations that come into play there for a business that's storing items?
The floodplain scenario always goes down to value or worth. So if you have things of assets or value, the BFE and the 1 foot above is part of that floodproof and protection. So that's the whole essence really of the elevation, is to protect the building and the assets within inside. So floodproofing mechanisms are definitely part of the ordinance.
But does that apply to, say, even storing things outside? Just curious.
Yeah, it can depend.
If it's a business, if it's personal, I don't know if that's something like that he be storing.
Yeah, that's a good question, because yeah, your vehicle, any items of that have wheels on it, there's typically a 180-day clock. And that's kind of where folks can play cat and mouse with us sometimes in terms of, okay, you moved it that much, or you moved it that much again to get your clock reset, but to not sit there and become a structure essentially in the floodplain is kind of that concept. Otherwise, what triggers floodplain development permits is either the erection of the structure or any kind of development. The word development seems to be used loosely sometimes on how you affect the ground or affect the dirt. So just by virtue of doing anything in the floodplain, you can virtually have to have a permit of some sort. And so just kind of comes down to monitoring if something is out there stored. Now, ideally, you would elevate the ground over the BFE to put your long-term vehicle there for a period of time. And that would actually eventually catch up to a floodplain development permit if they kind of elapse that clock.
So just out of curiosity, how much elevation would they have to build this up? Guess that,
Yeah,
to be able to get it above that.
it depends on what the surveyor comes up with the natural ground. And so what number that they eventually bring to the table to us. What happens is you run into two things. You need a floodplain development permit and you need a building permit. And so you're not going to get the building permit unless you get the floodplain development permit taken care of. And so they're going to have to bring us a BFE letter. They're going to have to show us what the discrepancy is between natural ground and there. So, and that's where folks have to make their decision on costs, how much elevation, where you're going to need. If that natural ground is very far away from what the BFE is, and maybe you need 8 feet of fill, or to, get to 9 feet above that, that's going to change some people's decisions on the respective properties. There's been properties in the county where folks have talked to us, had the conversation about, well, you're in the floodplain, you're going to have to build. And they kind of find out, oh, wow, there's quite a bit of difference there. And it really comes down to the pocketbook and cost, and how much you're going to have to pay to get that structure that you want. It's kind of fascinating when you drive around different areas where structures have been built, you can really tell they've been elevated, where these homes are on mounds out there, and a lot of that. And maybe the Salix area kind of to the east there, we can really identify floodplain pretty easily visually just by seeing some of that. So to me, that's sort of the image there that can illustrate that it's going to cost you a lot more to build in those areas. And the safeguard is you have to get a couple permits through us, plus you have to. You're not going to even get a county building or floodplain permit if you don't engage the DNR. And there's times where DNR will actually say, we're a delegated community, but the DNR sometimes looks at it and says, okay, we're going to be permitting this one too. Because they look at if it's a floodway fringe, and it's sort of, it links everything together where you might need the Corps of Engineers at times too, if you're near a place. So we have a very standard floodplain development permit application, which it tries to respond with all different things, but it kind of serves as a catch-all permit that you're going to go over here when it's needed. The most popular permit that we kind of get lately, if you want to kind of categorize, is wells and septics. When folks are kind of out there in the farm fields, they have or irrigation systems as well, and you're working in the floodplain area. Siouxland District Health alerts us because they're working with them on the floodplain side, and so they won't execute their permit until they're good with the county on the floodplain permit, and that is classified as development because you're working below ground. So structure versus development are two different concepts when it comes to the flood.
So the key element here is the applicants are well aware of the situation.
Yeah.
And well versed on the possible impacts.
And I did speak to them about the significance of this entire project. We've had various exchanges. They even have the surveyor directly contact me about the project as well. And that's why the surveyor actually started them up through this application process.
So can I ask who the surveyor is?
Gerhard.
Out of curiosity. Any other questions from anyone? Comments?
Some of that could require 7, 8 feet there.
Substantial.
Yeah, part of it.
Anybody else? We have no other comments or questions, or are we ready to entertain a motion? I am, if you are.
Make a motion to approve it.
We've got a motion to approve the application.
But the contingencies are right there.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we have a motion with the contingencies, pavement agreement. We have a second. And all in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is informational discussion requiring zoning requirements concerning the permitting of hazardous liquid pipelines, including the conditional use permit requirement from the zoning ordinance and possible ordinance or ordinance amendments. Hey, Van, this is your thing again. So bring us up to date.
Okay, as you may have been watching kind of the supervisor meetings, there's been some discussion over the last several months about the way the zoning ordinance could facilitate the permitting of any type of hazardous pipeline. And basically, the Woodbury County zoning ordinance itself has the conditional use permit labeling in our table of land use across every single zoning district. So what that would mean is if a pipeline company were to submit an application to Woodbury County, it would go through the normal order of the conditional use permit process. In other words, zoning commission review and board of adjustment decision. Your recommendation from the zoning commission would go over to the board of adjustment, and they would look at under the authority of either approving with conditions, or possibly denying a particular permit application. And I know the zoning commission members and the board of adjustment members know very well the essence of your duties in terms of engaging a conditional use permit process. And with that said, staff has kind of been tasked over the summer to look at various proposals out there to see if there's any ordinance adjustments or changes or amendments or a new ordinance possibly to be put into place to look at permitting of any future type of pipeline projects. And so we kind of saw that there's three type of options out there. One is we have infrastructure in place to look at the neighborhoods as we do through conditional use. The other option is to amend the zoning ordinance to offer further language on how to regulate the pipelines, whether you want to reference setbacks or further detail on the placement of the pipelines. Or the third option is to do a standalone ordinance and put the authority over possibly the board of supervisors to permit that, as was done at the wind procedures. And so I've shared this concept with the Board of Adjustment on Monday, just to give them the criteria. And originally, the staff's kind of view, working with the county attorney's office, was that we have the infrastructure in place to facilitate the permitting zoning commission. So the initial concept was to maybe ask the supervisors to look at a resolution that they could pass that would empower the zoning commission and the board of adjustment to ask further questions as it pertains to the criteria as part of the application process. The second concept, which is included in your packet, is a example from Shelby County, which would be kind of a concept of amending the zoning ordinance. And this could be kind of a hybrid concept where you offer more material inside of the zoning ordinance and still have the same parties view the applications. In other words, the Shelby example here offers some setback language, hazard mitigation language, etc., that could be a possible consideration for the county to look at. Here. And again, the third concept, beginning on page 39, is sort of a standalone ordinance, which would pretty much put the authority over at the Board of Supervisors level. Tuesday, which would have been last night, it was kind of referenced by Supervisor Raddick, start looking at, would like to see a setback instituted county level, something that's likely enumerated ordinance. And so with that said, it kind of puts us back to, do we consider this Shelby County language to an extent? And maybe, I think 5.07 and 5.08 are kind of the blank areas of the zoning ordinance. In other words, if you're to add a new section, that's where you would go and add further language. And it's not unprecedented to have extra language in the zoning ordinance as it pertains to a conditional use. You might recall that telecommunication towers kind of have a little section in there that we kind of look at as it talks about fall zones and other criteria. But for the most part, when we deal with conditional uses, it's pretty much us looking at the concept, bringing it to the zoning commission. They're looking to the 6 criteria and the 2 other considerations, and they're trying to really prove it to you all that they have a safe plan, or their plan fits with the area and it's not adversely affecting public safety and all the concepts that we look at, public health, et cetera, for the county. And so with that said, much of the zoning ordinance is designed for that, for the zoning commission and the Board of Adjustment to kind of go through that general regular order. So that's where staff originally with the county attorney's office looked at the zoning ordinance as the place for this to occur, where the concept would be to ask supervisors for additional questions. But kind of under the charge, if we're kind of pointed into the direction where if there's a request to start the public hearing process at this board here, to amend this, to add that further language. So we're kind of looking at supervisors possibly tasking us to put that on future agenda. See, zoning commission has the authority technically to start ordinance-based changes. In the magnitude of this scenario, it is kind of recommended that it's laid out kind of through the normal procedural order. I believe when we did the fireworks one back in 2018, you might recall when we stuck in that you can buy fireworks in commercial-based districts, that I believe the supervisors basically directed for the commission to possibly take that up. So that's what we're going to be kind of looking for here at some point, is to see about adding those respective, at least a setback criteria. I believe, to quote Supervisor Radig, I think he said around 500 feet or so. There's been definitely questions on what the Iowa Utilities Board technically can do with that. I know that there's been an open discussion on whether they can or cannot with 479B, which is the Iowa code that references what pipelines have to do through the Iowa Utilities Board and as they petition the county. So there's kind of quite a bit of generalized discussion. And I know with the Shelby County language, which is in your packet, they lay out a lot of whereases, which is basically justifications for ordinances being instituted and put into place. So if anything ever kind of goes through the legal order and challenged in any sort of way, they're always looking for justifications on why communities adopt respective ordinances. So those are definitely some considerations to look at. So it's just to know that there's those options out there, but it's looking like setbacks or something that possibly likely be addressed here in the future.
So can you? Shelby County has 1,000 foot or more.
Yeah, the Shelby County language, I believe, has some reference to 1,000.
It's 1,000 or more.
A residence or
Or
structure or
livestock.
livestock
Reference.
or-
2 miles from the city.
So, yeah, in our general discussion, and again, last night it was in the kind of the comment section at the end. It wasn't on an agenda item, so we'll be kind of looking for clarification on a pathway, basically, to address that.
So at one point in time, has the supervisor seen any of this yet? Are they just telling us that they want us to start
Well,
reviewing?
I don't have the official, but yeah, generally coming from the Supervisor Raddick last night, he's interested in setbacks.
At the very least, to include setbacks in our current language.
Yeah, and that's kind of where if the zoning ordinance itself is amended, it would likely have to initiate a section in there. And so likely this kind of concept that comes out of Shelby County could be something to consider. It does have hazard mitigation and relationships with other emergency service, first responders, et cetera. So there's a valid language in there, but I do want to be clear that our conditional use process, those are things that can be considered. And so I guess I've kind of seen it where we sure can learn a lot about pipelines and other concepts by even looking at ordinances, because your criteria that you normally look at are very broad. And if you think about any type of safety concept or whatever, you can tie into those in terms of kind of looking at the area. So really kind of the big question here really is the setback language. Typically, when you look at your borrow pits and your other ones, we're probably not talking about setbacks or those things, but we've definitely put conditions on borrow pits, and Mark Naram has written memos to the boards talking about cleanup and effects to the roads. And so conditions are definitely possible and they're enforceable by route of how the ordinance is written. And that's and I think that that's the significance of what the zoning commission and the board of adjustment do. These are very important citizen bodies that have the authority to make significant decisions as it relates to the criteria. So I guess the point I'm making is the tools are there, but yet there is the ability to add things or amend things that can be likely justified in terms of the public safety elements. So there's those possibilities.
Have any questions or comments on that? Anything more?
I guess, did Mr. Raddick's comment, was that directed because of the current pipeline proposed through the county? Was there any impact on existing pipelines, whether they're replaced or repaired? Did he talk anything?
I'm probably not going to touch on speculating any type of future scenarios, but it's kind of looking in general on how pipelines are regulated as a whole. I understand, I even have to defer to some of your experiences because I'm looking in the record. My understanding is that pipeline or segments have went to the conditional use procedure in the past. And I think maybe Northern Natural Gas had one in the 2012, 13 type of era. It simply went through the order and there were some, basic conditions that were put on. And then once you get to the Board of Adjustment, it becomes a resolution. And then that resolution is what they're bounded by to follow. In the magnitude of a pipeline, you have to think about the majority of conditional uses that come through here. Many of us, staff is very used to this. It's one parcel. It's usually one or two. We might recall the Mid-American borrow pits were several parcels. So that's kind of the largest one I've been involved with. But once you start looking at kind of a pipe corridor, zoning commission, Board of Adjustment, under the current language, it's imperative that they review it under all parcels, all locations. How does it fit specific to the areas? So there's a significant amount of homework as it comes to all of these proposals. It's not just simply going to a property, which much of our ordinance, most of our activities are not so wide scale as a whole. So
This
but-
could run through the entire county of Woodbury County
Yeah.
and you have multiple parcels
yes,
through
it's
various townships.
exactly. And so when a person submits an application, we're so used to on that form, parcel this, and that's it. Agricultural zoning district, well, we would have to know specifically all of that stuff, all of that, all those legal descriptions, all those respective areas across the route, and they would have to verify the ownership, who owns this, who's signing off on this. So we do have a very intricate way of the way the zoning ordinance works in terms of collecting that information for you. Because really what staff's job is that point is to collect all the information, make sure the application is in, declare the application complete, because that's a very big part of it as well. If it's incomplete, we're not going to put an application on the zoning commission agenda.
Right.
So we have to have ample time to study it. It has to come, before the zoning commission. Zoning commission, you all know what you do through the criteria and everything from that nature. And then recommendations are put into place because this is a recommending body. So we have that we have that staff viewpoint of looking at it. We have the zoning commission view. And so there's multiple checks and balances across the board on many applications. And so
Including pipelines.
including the current infrastructure. So if any kind of application of any company were to come in at any time, the county at least has some base structure to deal with these type of applications. So kind of going back to Supervisor Raddick had said is his focus was kind of referencing setbacks directly on that regard, and he kind of said 500 feet.
So even if we see the application, we make the recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
They would
Okay,
make.
they would make the decision, right? Okay, and we don't meet the criteria, the 1,000 feet.
Well-
Supervisor Raddick.
Well, right now, there's not a setback criteria, so that's
Right.
kind of what that's about.
That's his
They're
purpose.
talking
Okay.
about adding to the conditional.
The language.
Possible, with an ordinance to consider. The question is, like, even with Shelby County, change ordinances or adjust, there's always that opportunity for challenge. We know every action it takes could always lead to district court or something of that
Right.
nature. It's just normal order, actually.
Right.
When folks are lapsing every opportunity for a particular application. So those are just kind of normal orders. So the question is, that like with the telecommunication tower, there's another section in there to support or back up that and give you some tools to look at those criteria. So that would be kind of the general idea, is if a modified version of one of these type of proposed ordinances are put in there that empower. Again, it's a zoning issue too. And I should probably back up and say that we'll use the wind one, for example. The wind one was removed from zoning. And basically what that means is typically a comprehensive plan, the general plan and everything, is the whole basis of a zoning ordinance. And of course, other things as well. So the way your comprehensive plan is written, how it addresses public safety and all those various other issues, you link policy that you come up with, actual ordinances and law that you put together to justify that policy. The rezone that you looked at tonight, much of the decision process is that comp plan. You saw harmony between the land use map. It showed that district in the future plan of being general commercial, even though it's not now. Because the plan was passed at the time when that was ag, basically. But the county in that comprehensive plan was saying, we desire the corridor of Highway 20 to be commercial between Lawton and Sioux City. And so we know that there's several ag parcels, and they'll probably continue to be ag for a significant amount of time. But if that landowner, whoever they may be, applies to the zoning commission for consideration of a change in ordinance, they have that there to say, hey, we fit with the general plan. We're not trying to put a suburban residential district here, which we know probably would not fit, right? In that corridor because it doesn't match the respective zoning there. So I'm only using that example because what Shelby County has done with their whereases is they've linked them very carefully to their comp plan. And you have to be linked to the comp plan. And I think back to some of the Iowa State training that we've been at too. They talked about the necessity of the comp plan backing up the ordinance because of any arbitrary scenario. If you go and change something and your comp plan isn't clearly address it enough, that's where your challengers are going to go. And so using a zoning ordinance to regulate zoning matters as this is a zoning matter where this placement is a comp plan / zoning ordinance matter. So I will tell you that the staff general recommendation would be that probably to amend the zoning ordinance with, supplemental updated language, if that's the case, if that's the desire the supervisors formally want to take. But again, staff does look at the current infrastructure as well, working at the county attorney's office to see that, we could do the resolution thing too. And I'm just simply bringing that up just because it's been part of the discussions as well. So those are kind of the possible approaches ahead. But it's very possible to consider this in a future zoning commission public hearing.
Yes, another thing I can see being problematic would get it back with pipeline being deemed as public use. You'll have individuals that aren't in favor of this, but it'll be going on their property. So eminent domain will probably come into play. So that's another issue where with the setback, say, as an example, if they're taking a swath of ground to their property where there's a 500 foot on each side, how does that affect that landowner that wasn't even in favor of the project? Like,
For future development, like.
if we, like right now, I've got 3 pipelines running through my property, one's 65 feet from my house. It's been there since 45. But if we go forward and our decision of a setback impacts that landowner negatively, even though the easement's only written for 50 feet, we may be taking 1,000 feet. That's just something that I guess I'd look at that could be problematic.
I know, just my experience with pipelines, it's a gas pipeline, this was in Sergeant Bluff, that went through a development, it's a housing development. You had 100 foot on either side that you couldn't construct any property. So, I mean, we're talking 500, we're talking 1,000, we're talking about the pipelines.
And typically those
Regulations
are
for
that are written
100,
by the pipeline.
Right.
They want.
this
XP.
much,
There's multiple ones that don't even have a setback.
right?
You could build right on the property line, or on the line of the pipeline.
Right, which makes me think, the liability to the pipeline company itself, if something was constructed closer than that, it would be their liability.
Well, that's the thing, I guess I'd get back to where the setbacks have to be determined by the pipeline. If we set 500 pipeline companies, we only need 50 feet.
Right,
Who compensates the landowner for another 450 feet at each side.
right,
That's where I look at it, that we could run into issues. I understand the safety, the setback, but there again, like you said, pipelines currently run through neighborhoods. And they're in the right of ways, or they're in certain areas. If we expand it to a distance that might be 1,000 feet, I mean, total, how does that work for, especially the individuals that weren't even in favor of the pipeline?
Right.
Got there, it was taken through eminent domain. I don't know are they gonna come to the county then and say, well, compensate Steve for that other 450 feet for my strip of property?
All pipelines considered hazardous.
They appear to be in that classification.
Those hazardous lipid pipelines, is there any other kind?
In here, they list what they can carry to be determined. Be hazardous, but for the most part, I think most pipelines would be considered under this wording hazardous.
I didn't know if there'd be two sets of regulations, pipelines, hazardous.
A water pipeline versus substance.
Do we have any comments or questions from the public concerning pipelines?
This is the submission they made on the, my 74 docket. And that's not quite right, but this is the scope of the project.
Great. Have you introduced yourself?
Please tell me, I'm at 1026 Charles Avenue. So, yeah, this is your scope of your project. You're going to have to examine every parcel that it crosses. So, the reason for setback is not to limit the landowner, but to restrict where the pipeline can go to begin with. So if you have a hospital, you're not gonna want the pipeline to 500 feet of the hospital, you're not gonna want it 500 feet of the residence. CO2 pipeline, water lines run at about 55 pounds of pressure. Gas lines, natural gas run at about 500 pounds of pressure. Supercritical CO2 line is gonna run at 2,100 pounds of pressure. So if that would rupture, it immediately creates a crater. It zippers open the lines. It probably freezes the ground around it. It goes up into a plume. And then as it goes back into a gas, it settles down into the ground and it follows low-lying areas. And it depends on the wind direction, temperature, and that type of thing, how far it will go. But it can travel for miles. And that certain concentrations of sleep. So that is our concern with the pipeline, and we have 200 signatures asking the organization to create very stringent setbacks and rules for these pipelines to protect people, property, schools, hospitals, all that type of thing. So it's not that you cannot build on the pipeline, it's not there yet. Pipeline will not allow anyone to build or plant anything on 50 feet. Cannot use that property at all. I talked to our insurance company and they said we will decide on a case by case basis if there is an incident, which means they're not going to insure me in the case of this pipeline. Should it damage my property, kill my rivers, cattle, that sort of thing. So landowners are really going to be caught between pipeline company and the insurance companies. I would not be afraid to set a very stringent ordinance or be afraid to be taken to district court because these pipelines have unlimited amount of finances. Some of it is financed in one instance by a South Korean organization, Navigator, and that will come through here too. So this is not the only project you're going to be decided for. You know one. They are financed by BlackRock out of China. So we are faced with huge amounts of money, foreign investment. So I think that 500 feet for a setback, that's 16 yards. That's in the red zone of a football game. There's no way you could escape that. There's no way you could evacuate a building. These companies, some anyway, has not been willing to. So
You said 500 or 50?
The 500 was what Rowley suggested.
That's one.
And that's in our
16
ordinance now.
yards.
Yeah, it's 16 yards. 500 feet.
50 feet would be 16.
So, but yeah, want to protect the buildings.
That'd be 150 yards.
Any other questions about the pipeline or anything? They're not going to do an environmental impact study. They've not so far submitted any safety. They have not worked with our EMS yet. But yeah, they have filed for a permit. And they have decided that a hearing will be in Fort Dodge. Haven't decided the exact date for that. We're going to deny it.
Are you a landowner? Is that what?
Yes.
So all this information that you've just gathered yourself, this isn't your expertise or your pipelines and stuff, this is just information you've gathered?
Right. Then we have a landowner group. Some of those people are experts on survey. So they discuss their knowledge. There's some webinars. And some, things like that.
When you say landowner group, is a landowner group in Woodbury County, Plymouth County, Monona County?
Landowner group is anyone that is affected by the pipeline. So this goes to the 5 states. So anyone that wants to join that group is landowner. Participate in that group.
Within the 5 states, is what you're saying, okay.
Checking.
Thank you.
Yeah, if this is regarding this pipeline situation, the proposed use, how does that apply to our ability as a county to regulate that for zoning? Or do they have a power that's regulated by the Iowa Utility Board saying, no, it's not through here?
That's a good question. Some of this is a bit of uncharted territory where the authority of the Iowa Utilities Board, can they override us? We've been kind of trying to study that to an extent.
For the greater good.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's been kind of part of the considerations too. But it's very intricate and challenging because of that Iowa Utilities Board. And so we're still trying to get a sense of kind of similar to the telecommunication towers. We can only ask or do certain things. And so we have to look further to understand the relationship with setbacks and everything of that nature. The PHMSA, they typically use the 50-foot. That seems to be kind of a standard across the board. And so kind of implementing the setback, I know 479B in Iowa code isn't so clear on a setback scenario. So if it's brought in and put into an ordinance, that's something to kind of look at as the area of possible contention possible.
The reason I brought that up is I was at a meeting in Des Moines, and some of the counties are looking at limiting the use of eminent domain. And by court history, they don't have that power to limit or projects like this. That's why I was curious if the zoning's going to even have any ability. If the counties don't have the ability to limit eminent domain, do they have the ability to limit it through setback?
Well,
That's the reason I brought that up.
and some of it is up in the air where it can be challenged because we can talk about home rule and trying to invoke. And so the question is, anything that turns into the litigation scenario would likely be in the courts possibly, but it depends too on how well it fits within. If something's reasonable, I mean, there's different ways to argue, but in general, it's important that any policy is a policy that's orderly and clear and meets with the comp plan, with the county has the ability to regulate.
So at this point in time, we have no prior knowledge of any kind of court cases that have set any kind of precedents
Well,
within, say, the 5 state area that we're dealing with.
as far as I can see, there's been, I know this one ordinance that's been passed, or I think it went through their zoning board maybe around the 23rd or so. So all this concepts are very kind of in a early stage.
So we don't know of any court cases, any that are setting precedents.
As it
yet.
pertains to a certain type, so that's where you gotta, as we go back into our conditional use category, we categorize that as a pipeline. And so these can be diverse. I know Tom had kind of addressed hazardous, not so much hazardous designation, but those are all things that kind of have to be considered.
Which at this point in time, the conditional use permit is our best avenue to be able to regulate to the extreme if possible, you know, depending on.
Well, the conditional use permit is the same thing for every application that you get in. The applicant has to prove to the zoning commission and the board of adjustment that the project fits within the area.
Right.
And they have to prove that all those criteria can be reasonably met. And so that's the continuous threshold there. And so, in a way, when you go back to 2008, I might have to ask some of that were around when you developed that ordinance. There's sometimes ordinances are left with enough openness to be able to kind of catch the wide scale of the project. So and that's where we go back into where the comprehensive plan will always matter. And of course, there's one underway, the 2040 plan is something that's being worked on right now with the Simcoe partnership and everything. And so that's where these kind of public meetings, they just had one in Hampton last week as well. The public should definitely consider being a part of the comp plan process too, because those comments are put into place and they're considered. And that goes as the basis of the ordinance too. And when I had some discussions with the Simcoe reps, we oftentimes talk about how public policy is formed. The proactive policy sometimes isn't as popular or exciting as the reactive, where now I'm affected by something versus, wait a minute, come and talk in your community about how you want to see your community be in the next 25, 30 years. It's not as exciting, but yet that stuff that isn't as exciting is still the most important part of the backing of all the ordinances that we have. So to me, any policy change and everything always has to go back to that comp plan. And I would encourage everyone to kind of have a glance at that once in a while, just to see what our priorities are over the next several years, because we're still in our current one working towards it.
I'm Gail Solquist, I'm on that one. I am a landowner. The present map shows the pipeline going 500 feet from my house. 500 feet is not even an acre. 600 feet is an acre. So it's very close. It's also going to go right by a pioneer cemetery. That is a nice neighborhood landmark in our community. And then it'll fence is here and then I'm gonna go right here. Right. So we also have some unique features in our land. A different kind of wetland, that area. It's I've had the various services, we all met there. And the authorities examine wetland. And it shows that it's called the site of sea, which is a very unusual feature. I don't know if somebody knows that's there. I think they know there's some water there. But I don't think they know that this is a feature. I don't think they also know that we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on tiling in that valley. They went across. And it's impossible to fix the pipeline. We also have waters, we have two types of land, we have valleys, and we have hills. Our hills have got terraces, our valleys have got tile. They're going to go through both of them, and they will never be the same. And, I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Shatasha, Mississippi, where they did have a Russian pipeline. And it went through a hilly, steep portion of the land there. Fortunately, it was not near the town, but the students did lean over to the little community. There were, if I can remember this right, no, I can't. But there were a number of people that were affected. Nobody died because it was on the pipeline. But there were a number of people that rescued. They were able to rescue them because they weren't right in the exact boom of the disaster. In our situation, our emergency response teams are not equipped. They don't have vehicles, they don't have training. When a rupture occurs, it not only takes the oxygen away from people and animals, it takes it away from your vehicles. So even if you realize, you probably won't, that a pipeline occurs in your area, and you want to get away from it, what do? You go out and jump in the car. Car's not gonna start. And if it does start, it won't run very long. And the emergency response teams are going to have the same problem. We don't have electric vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, and we're not going to. I've heard that a electric fire truck costs $1 million. So can you imagine a little town where Justina, Bronson, Martin, Mobile, all of them out there. They can't afford $1 million anything. And they don't need just one, they need the ambulance, they need fire trucks, they need everything. They all need. So, that's one of my major concerns about this pipeline, is the health. It takes 4 minutes for a person to die during that boom down the pipeline. So, and the pipelines have kind of admitted that there is going to be an area where they do not want the rest of the people will not be allowed to enter. I don't know that. Tell them to. So the next pathway for them is to house the people on the outside. And so that is a big concern. I don't want to be, I don't want to have my kids in my house. Whenever we can. And I think each one of you has had. How would you feel if this pipeline was only say, oh, it's okay. That's progress. It's not progress. These pipelines, 80% of these type of pipelines fail. They are not scientifically proven. Chevron in Australia, Shell in Canada have tried this sequestration projects and they admitted they could not do it. They used up all the government money that the government allowed them to do this project, but they used more carbon dioxide, put more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere about these projects. So there is no proof that this is out the greenhouse gas. We need to be spending our money, our taxpayer money, to be more off into this. On research and, actual situations that can help control, the carbon dioxide. As I see this project, there was an individual in Iowa who saw a money-making opportunity, and jumped on it, and he didn't care about anybody else. All these, get those foreign credits from the United States government. He's got China interested, he's got North Korea interested, he's got some of the Arab countries interested, and they're all shoving money into this. He's also got a lot of big petroleum companies in the United States interested. Why are they interested? Because if you take sequestered carbon dioxide, it can be used again to squeeze the oil that's left, like in the bottom fields and North Dakota. It can be squeezed, it can be used to squeeze the remaining oil out of those. And the oil companies. So it's a money grab, and most people are not aware of this. Why don't make a hasty decision. Take this home and study it. I've been studying it for a year, and I'm sure I still don't know anything that is important about this. But I think you've got to think first about the health of the Woodbury County. The supervisors asked for ordinance for the pipeline, or for the turbines. Okay, that was approximately half a mile.
2,500 feet is what they amended.
Okay, well, yeah. A mile is 5,780 feet, I think. Half mile would be 2,600 or 2,640 feet. So they give a good setback to the people that didn't have turbines. Why did they give it to them? Well, because people were complaining that they couldn't sleep at night. Too much noise. There was ice flying off the blades of those turbines. Well, I don't know. I don't sleep at night either. Pipeline is going to be in my neighborhood yet. But if it's 500 feet from my house, I think we have to consider the health of people that are on the pipeline, not just the people that have. Woodbury County is a very densely populated county, as I understand. So we do have a lot of acreages. And, we have some big farms too, but we do have a lot of acreages. The people that are directly on the pipeline, we got notification that this is gonna happen. The people next to us, across the place, did not get any notifications. How are they supposed to? They wouldn't even tell us who was on the pipeline how. We had asked and asked, so we could figure out where that pipeline is from. They refused to release that information because they said it was a privacy. Those people not on there. That's pretty regarded. Of course, they want the name is. We need to talk to each other. You know where it's. They have done some strange, very strange things. They call them illegal, but they're just tricky little things that they pull on us. So this is not a public company. Does everybody realize that? This is a private company that's asking for present the name for their private thing. I cannot invest in it. They don't want us. I asked. No, they want the big bucks. Give it investors. So I have a whole list of things here that I could go on and on about. Oh, here's a good one. The federal regulating body for pipelines is called FOSTA. That's a, what's the,
Yeah, I can look at it.
yeah, pipeline hazardous safety, something or other, to set up regulations. Anyway, it's their job to set up regulations for pipelines. They have none for carbon dioxide pipelines right now. And they said it's gonna take 2 years to get those set up. Meanwhile, the pipelines are pushing. We want to get this done. They're holding us up. That was the part of a hearing that held here last week. And it's supposed to, the result is supposed to come out here before Friday. If you watch the news. But, PHMSA has not even looked into this enough to other rules and regulations. So you could bet these big pipeline companies are pushing to get in there and what comes out of this. Rules and regulations. At the most, I think we should have a moratorium on pipelines until it's the rules. But if we can't stop them, I would be very happy. They have been massive leaders. They bullied a lot of the other people in the sign. They lied to us. They've been on our property without permission. Even though we have no precedent. So they walked right past my no trespassing. On my land, I cannot talk. They came to the road by then, he called me also, I said, you know, I said, no. So I went, got my card for what they were expecting, and I should be there, I had not seen this. And there was, sheriff's deputy there. They said they would not be back. They got the cover. It's like, they were back. And they didn't come and tell me. But evidently they got their driveness. But it's little things like that that off of this, we don't know. There's a docket, several dockets on the Iowa Utility Board website. And people can write in with their comments, whether they approve or disapprove or just a comment, you know, about it or whatever. Over 90% of the comments have been against. So think about that. A lot of people, that's pretty good. It's probably mostly the priors. But, you know, it's important that you guys educate yourselves, find out, and think about how would you feel? They were putting this 50 miles from your house. 500 miles, 50 feet. I would bring them there from their house. So right to the river area. So they've got plan. So, let's see, this plan says it is, oh, this is not how the blue piece. Who wants a pipeline? That was their house. It's a big piece. My land probably, if that goes in my land, go. And So, that also means that there's gonna be less money coming into the taxes. As long as my value, I hope my tax values, tax payments also go down. They don't care a thing, so the county's gonna lose. And I don't realize that they figured that out yet. The pipeline companies said, oh, we're going to, pay all these taxes. The county, well, they should. They're gonna tear up our roads, they're gonna tear up our land, they're gonna tear up our bridges. Our roads are not built for heavy construction out there. And I think you know, Chris, if you live where you used to live, when I stopped at your place once, you know, we have a lot of problems as it is. They close those roads sometimes of the year. We get a truck. Because they are not equipped to handle that type of equipment. So, I know several years ago, my husband was in the hospital, I was coming home like in the hospital at night, the roads were so bad. I felt like I was on the roads. So we are not, we don't have roads that stand up to all the heavy equipment that they're going to, want to bring in to build.
It's your list. Is that something that you would leave with us to share? Would you like? Yes, the list that you're working off right now. I understand.
I was gonna have one for each of you tonight, but I could not get that printed over today, of course. And this is not a good copy either, but I'll
Share it if Dan has it. And I think we understand the importance and the concerns that you have. I think especially every point that you mentioned. We've all lived by something that's hazardous, I think, in this county at one point in time. So that's why we have hearings. We're very interested in the public comment and their concerns.
I think this is the most hazardous project.
I think it's one of the most that we've seen in our lifetimes for sure. Yeah. So we don't want to take this lightly.
No, I hope not.
I hope we can emphasize that to the public, and that's why we want to take our time with this, like you said, to really consider it.
And if you have any questions, any referrals, I've got a whole list of, sites that you can Google articles from different magazines, that have examined this problem. And I would be glad to share that too. I was gonna get that back up today too.
I appreciate that. If you want to share it with Dan, that would be great. It'd be distributed to us and we review the information and stay in touch with you on that
Yeah,
too.
and I could do that list of references.
Right. I'd appreciate that.
I think everybody needs to understand what the living.
Great. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for letting us talk and, was on
That's,
is very important.
it is, and that's why we like to have the public here to tell us what they think. Thank you so much. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments at this point in time? Concerning this item? Okay. I'll continue to review, discuss, and research. Okay, all right, that's your deal, right? Make sure we are informed. Okay,
Question I guess I have is making sure, obviously, due diligence, I think is very important. Timeliness of it may be important also, to not let an indecision become our decision. So we have criteria we can stand by, but we should also be proactive if we're going to make an amendment. Not make it out for a year.
but we want to make something, be sure that we're making the right decision when we do it. Yeah, so as it stands, we have something in place that protects us and we can be as stringent as we possibly can, which is good. But if there's something else that we can do to make it even better, then by all means, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Is that. Yeah. That's the part to do on.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? At this point, anything else? No?
Well, as with any ordinance, whether it be the next one we're gonna talk about as well. And any proposal, you gotta look at all the objective facts across the board, how things fit. I can't emphasize enough the development plan, priorities in county, et cetera. All these things are objective, procedures that have to be looked at from all angles, all angles exhausted.
You do a very good job of doing, I think. Yes. Thank you. Should we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, we have a permitting, informational discussion, permitting grant by special events for sale of food, beverages with or without alcohol, goods and services, and right by selects Woodbury County as the location for the annual event. Dan, can you give us more information, please?
Yes, I have before you in the packet, a kind of a solution to the RAGBRAI permitting issue. This ordinance proposal has been put together with the county attorney's office for assistance to review it. What we did was we took the concerns that you delivered us last month as it came to creating a special event category could possibly have unintended consequences. When I ran this through the county attorney's office, we looked real carefully at the land use summary table. And what we found was at the very beginning, that very first paragraph or so before the land use summary table, it tells us what uses are. It says principal use, conditional use, and it even says temporary use. But temporary is not defined in that ordinance. It was just simply referenced. And so what we did was we looked at creating a two-tier solution to RAGBRAI. And what we found was some counties were doing what you call sunset independent ordinances, where they go pass an ordinance for RAGBRAI and go through all that procedure. And when I talked with Joshua Whitman, again, to the county attorney's office about this is a zoning issue, once again. And what we came up with was defining what the temporary use is as it pertains to RAGBRAI. And so the solution is to create a two-tier sunset scenario. RAGBRAI is something that happens at least once in a while. I mean, it will happen in Woodbury every now and then, and maybe every 5 or 6, 7 years or so, it could possibly be here. It could be up in Puddle somewhere. And so what we came up with, and we were, I had a meeting with Jeremy Taylor as well as some others at the chamber on how this could possibly be addressed. Basically what happened this summer was there couldn't be any kind of commercial sales or anything along the route. However, a free will donation scenario could happen. But the true scenario that really triggered this was an issue is sort of setting up the alcohol type of tents along the RAGBRAI route. So what we came up with was a scenario that doesn't affect the rest of the county or the rest of the special use policies to an extent. But what it does is it adds 2 categories to the land use summary table. One for RAGBRAI, a special event for a special event of RAGBRAI. So RAGBRAI in itself becomes a use scenario. And the other one is RAGBRAI if you choose to sell alcohol. And what this does is it sunsets the ability for groups or folks to go on private property, not in the right of way, to go out and sell some snacks or some bottled water or some items along the RAGBRAI route without any permitting or any interference from that way, as long as they stay out of the right of way and simply hold their private event. However, if alcohol is involved, and because of the spirit of the ordinance, we added a second line that said RAGBRAI if you desire to sell alcohol. What that does is it brings them to the zoning commission and the board of adjustment to review the situation at hand for Ragbri as it pertains to the sales of alcohol there. So what it is it's a two-tier process. You have a choice. You either you don't sell alcohol, we basically leave you alone, or if you sell alcohol, the reason is they're the conditional use permit. If we have commercial property, we know that they have to come here for conditional use permit for alcohol to sell alcohol on the premises, as well as that the state, they have to go through the state board as well and go through the board of supervisors. And typically what happens is I'll get a call from the auditor's office and say, does so-and-so meet the zoning requirements? Then we look it up. Have they had a conditional use permit before? And that's a yes. If they don't have a conditional use permit, then their case has to be brought up to the zoning commission, board of adjustments. So talking through this with the county attorney's office, we felt that it reflects the current zoning ordinance because of the significance of what alcohol and the consequences, et cetera, for selling it off that property. However, kind of like with the kid with the lemonade stand kind of scenario, this allows for just a sunset period to set up the day before Ragbri and close down basically the day after Ragbri and allow for situations to happen during that time frame. And the reason we're comfortable with this proposal is because you still have to go through Siouxland District Health if you're going to do certain scenarios that if you're going to sell possibly like packaged goods. And I know some of that stuff has went through legislature as well in recent time to look at maybe backing off on certain aspects of that. But there is still a check in there where I believe in the during Ragbri, Ivy, I think Ivy kind of went out during the route there as well, because there were a few things that, of course, did go on that was supposed to be, not for profit, basically suggested donation. But this grew out of the supervisor's request to fix this scenario directly. It's defined to specifically fix Ragbri because Ragbri is a common enough item that we believe that this fixes that scenario that we have there without touching special events, which I'll talk about kind of in the next agenda item as well. So this is something we'd like to bring forward for probably an early public hearing to, and you'll look at on page 54, where anytime you amend the ordinance or add to the ordinance, you're basically amending the table of contents where you, and so the idea is to add a new section 5.07. And then amendment number 2, this adds the term temporary use to the land use summary table. And what we would do is we would put a TU across some zoning districts as it indicates there, which would allow it to happen. But we would also put a C, the one with alcohol, across some districts as well. And what this does is this brings clarity to Ragbri. So if they can look very carefully and know what the conditions are in the ground for Berry County and know whether they can, let's say a community organization wants to go out, gets a deal with private property to go sell some snacks or something, that would be fine. If the alcohol is involved, there's a double catch on the alcohol. Go to the supervisors, to the auditor's office. You have to come here. So that's where that would be identified. So the amendment number 3 there includes the special event Ragbri with the temporary use. And then number 4 includes it with the conditional use. And then amendment number 5 basically revises our definition of what the uses are so that it has the words temporary in there. Then number 6, basically number 6 adds the section 5.07 to the ordinance. You'll see where it says special event Ragbri number 3, special event Ragbri number 4, which is the trigger point between alcohol and no alcohol. So that's what we came up with.
Is there any limitations by having the word Ragbri in there? For instance, like 2 years ago, when the guys that ran it wanted to leave and start their own thing, and then COVID hit, there was gonna be a RAGBRAI competitor. So
This is specific, and this is the legal advice that we got, was to specifically target this event.
Right.
Because some counties have done that. And so kind of early on in the language there, where we define what RAGBRAI is within the definition. The Des Moines Register's annual grade bicycle ride across America. This is specific to this because this is one of those events that are just integrated into the community, kind of like with the city with Saturday in the park.
Right.
Style event.
what I'm saying though is, if they change the name, because the guys remember that was right at RAGBRAI, they wanted to leave and start their own and crush RAGBRAI.
This here would be specific to that, and so that would have to create a separate discussion. It's really about the intensity of what that organization has been about and how it would tie directly into the ordinance. So that's the advice that was given, because what it does is it locks in that as a specific scenario. And it creates a fix, because it's a sunset fix. It's a sunset clause, basically. RAGBRAI defines when they come to RAGBRAI, they have to announce it there, then that becomes the official date. Then this ordinance surrounds that date. And so if alcohol comes, they have to bring a site plan to the zoning commission, to the Board of Adjustment, and they have to see that there's a suitable scenarios there, just like again with our 6 criteria and other considerations. Each site would have to be looked at in terms of if there's alcohol, but if there's not alcohol, it kind of leaves it to the property owners, et cetera, to not affect some of the basic general rights.
But generally speaking, we already regulate this with conditional use permits.
We do not have a specific standard.
Right,
Yeah,
but we also have the opportunity to set clauses on any conditional use.
Yeah, you can set conditions, recommend conditions to the Board of Adjustment across the board. So if you're getting, if the alcohol one, let's just say this is in the ordinance, the alcohol one counts, you would have the ability to put specific conditions on that could be a little bit more restrictive, possibly.
Whether it's RAGBRAI or whatever.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's the science of the way conditional uses across the board work.
Right.
And the reason, again, the conditional use was added is the spirit of the ordinance. We would never propose something that would not reflect likewise uses. It fits in there with scale when it comes down to that, as the conditional use was decided long ago to be. We have in there restaurants with alcohol, general commercial, conditional use. You have to see that.
Temporary permits, just in general.
Yes.
I wonder about targeting RAGBRAI as an event and repercussions of that, because it appears that would be targeting that event.
It's gonna be an upside for landowners having this, so they could do these things.
I understand the purpose of it, but we also have that opportunity for conditional use permits.
We don't for RAGBRAI. That's where our hands were tied this summer. In terms of being able to just say, we couldn't just say, okay, go do it or go sell, because that was kind of the blockade that was we were affected by. It would be kind of trying to pull out an interpretation, and what the legal advice was that enumerating the event in there protects the other aspects and directs it at that. And the reason I say that is because some counties have done standalone ordinances, and this keeps it with zoning, but the standalone is strictly passed across the board for the entire RAGBRAI event. But what this does here is this cleanly fixes the issue. RAGBRAI comes in, this is the date, these are the set rules here. You can do this from your land, but if you're gonna do the alcohol thing, you need to know to go to the county and work through the county's regulations on that. So it is the flexibility there where we're not gonna prohibit folks from selling bottled water, which technically we could have directly, we basically did this summer. You cannot sell bottled water.
I bet Ivy staff would be in favor of this. It would help their district health stuff up.
Yeah.
Their job easier.
What are the thresholds though for Ivy staff, Ivy? 100 bottles of water, 200 bottles of water?
Well, I know that they have different rules when it comes to packaged and any items that are made there. Not as aware, once in a while when I have a chance to talk to them a little bit more, they told me that things are a bit ebb and flow right now in the state code. Some things have loosened a little bit when it comes to the regulation of packaged items. She gave me some code sections at one time. She actually said during the middle of RAGBRAI, as this was going on, it kind of offered a little bit of confusion across the board. But I know that maybe prepared items, something, there is a regulation that they are permitting on. And I did email and spoke with Kevin Grinder as well. We need to, do something here because it doesn't meet the zoning, and here they were out looking. And so that's where we ran into the logistical problem, is RAGBRAI and those groups could not operate under that capacity. I went back and I looked, they were here 2015, didn't see any zoning determinations or any records. 2012, and what was happening? Why does this problem exist now and that exists before? And I think it's because these independent or these vendors came in, tried to make an agreement with property owners and kind of set up a tent to sell those different items there. And then I get a call from the auditor's office, 3 sites want to have a tent out there. And I say, sorry, it doesn't meet the zone.
It was more commercial businesses wanting to come in than just a 4-H group wanting to sell bottled water.
But technically that affects the 4-H and all those other groups as well. And that's kind of what this fix is about, a community organization. And that's why we said the only way you can do it is free will donation type of thing versus running a commercial enterprise. I tried to turn over every rock to find a solution. And, even the home occupation standard would not fit with that. The land use summary table standard would not fit with that. And I originally shared with the county attorney's office, the special use language. And I delivered them your concerns about how that could affect other uses if we're saying festival or this, and then that even makes it more problematic. And so the legal advice was enumerate the event in there. And I feel like that was really sound advice because it directly targets that event. And with the magnitude of RAGBRAI actually getting ordinances in other communities, that it's a reasonable effort to fix this item. And I've shared this concept with the supervisors as well. And I know that there's an expectation that it'll be taken up. It's likely that RAGBRAI might start possibly here. So there's kind of a necessity to look at that.
So I see that you have something included here from Polk County. They've adopted.
That's the last
2019.
one.
Oh,
That's what I
good.
shared with you last month.
Okay.
And be ready to go to the next agenda item.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. Yeah, if we're done talking about that one.
Generally,
They need to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
basically, we'd likely like to run it possibly at the next meeting, possibly. That specific ordinance, I'll talk a bit to supervisors about the directory on that. But the idea is to get it on the zone commission for discussion, et cetera, to amend the ordinance. And then depending on what the recommendation is from this body, then it would go up to the 3 or so public hearings at the supervisor's level. And the whole concept is to have that section 7 in, just make the tweaks to the definitions, and hopefully each of those 6 amendments kind of show the target areas.
Anything out of the commission today that just,
I typically, we, just like with the pipeline, it's share discussion to make everybody aware of kind of what the next steps are. You all could decide to, go ahead and take it up for next, because things can start in the zone. The supervisors can direct as well at this kind of event. So if there's a general sense where you're okay with putting it on as a public hearing, actually this month, because tonight's a special meeting. So I know that it has been referenced at supervisor meetings a few times as well. And I've been directed by both supervisors Taylor and Raddick to bring a solution up.
Anybody have any thoughts or
I don't have any problem with it.
just like? Okay, should we move on? Move on. Let's move on at this point.
Okay, I just simply put what we had on there last month is just an item to discuss. If we want to have maybe a special events category at some point, at first we have these two concepts kind of together as one. And the county attorney's office again felt that we need to specifically target that. Supervisor Raddick had mentioned the need to possibly address wider scale special events necessary. And again, what I'm getting at is going back to your advice last month, I'm seeing kind of the enumerated factor again, where you do that and you're saying, what about this one? Or what about this one? So that would generally be my concern, but just I want you to be aware that we're looking at this one too, generally, but the RAGBRAI fix was meant to fix RAGBRAI, but the question is, we need to address festivals, carnivals, circuses, all those type of things under a special event kind of category. Generally, we've been advised not to, kind of talking with the county attorney's office. So it's just kind of, I'll be kind of looking at this as well, future, and update you on, and if you have any ideas on areas we can adjust to special events. But again, there's not anything prohibiting some private property owners holding, personal private events on your property. If your own thing, we're not going to prohibit a wedding. We're not going to prohibit a very private special event. So those are kind of the laws of unintended consequences to always look at with several ordinances. And that's again where the RAGBRAI one came out of, is that doesn't create the unintended consequences that a wide category would. That's really all I have.
Questions or comments on that one? So that moves us on to the public comment on matters not on the agenda. Do we have anything on public comment? Matters not on the agenda.
No one on the phone.
Hearing nothing. So commissioners' comments or inquiries on number 7. Do you have anything there you'd like to bring up? Everybody's fading fast here. Okay, staff update, number 8.
Generally, kind of at this point, the Simcoe kind of did 4 weeks or so of, had sent out an email on kind of community events. And I know that they're still working tirelessly trying to collect as many community events as possible. I know Aaron over there has kind of mentioned maybe going off of some council meetings and things like that off of some of the small towns. When you hear of any updates on that, please kind of share with everybody you know that they're looking for community input, basically across the board on the general plan. But the idea is to, at some point, have a development plan in place that it'll of course go through zoning commission and it'll ultimately be adopted as a resolution by the supervisors on that whole basis. But there's still definitely a research process, and I know they'll probably have some steering type of things coming up. So
have you had any feedback then as far as attendance and participation or
Attendance has been pretty low.
low? Okay, that's what I was wondering. Do we have any kind of feedback then? I'm assuming because we have low attendance that we're not getting much for feedback.
It's been very well attended. There's been a few comments, but they're definitely looking at ways to try to draw more interest in terms of that.
I know they advertise, the advertisement is on in the Sioux City Journal, in the news, in the
They did, and we put it out on the Facebook. They put it out on the Facebook.
various
So,
newspapers.
and that's so like I referenced before, the challenge of a development plan is helping us all think. If you're not focused zeroing in on a particular issue, you're asked the whole broad question, where do you see Woodbury County in the next 25 or 30 years? Unless you're a stakeholder, you stand behind something, you believe in something, that can be a tough question to ask across the board. I've always kind of thought about that quote, one of those leadership philosophers, Leonard Sales once said, you stand where you sit. In other words, a lot of our decision making and our things come from our surroundings where we're affected. Folks in the Hampton area are going to have probably different views of the county than people in the Sloan area, and we're a very diverse county. If you think about it across the board, you got the land forms, the different debates that come out of that. So just asking in the wide scale until there's a direct policy impact to somebody, I think generally we don't really dive into, well, yeah, it's a nice place to live, but until there's a very specific issue at hand. So I think across the board as a whole in history, that's the problem with development plans.
Right.
Unless they're developed at a time when there are controversial issues that would bring folks together. We actually thought in conversations with Aaron, there's been wind issues, there's been other issues that have come up. I've never seen the basement as full as they were during the wind energy debates. That place was fire marshal kind of calculate there. And so that robust debate, that information is very helpful when you react to a policy. But it'd be nice if development plans were a way that, everybody could pack the place.
It's just all kind of nebulous until they do make a policy and we have a problem. It's kind of yeah, that's typical, historic.
So with that said, I guess any other update is, of course, always pay attention. I would always recommend pay attention to supervisor meetings, supervisors' agendas, pull them off the website, just kind of see what's on there. Just a little tidbit, they put the packets out on Fridays, meaning the agenda comes out on Friday, so you would typically know late Friday afternoon what goes on the Board of Supervisors agendas on Tuesday. And sometimes the backup materials and everything is in there, pull them up off the website. So that's very key to citizen participation as a whole, to know what happens at each of those respective events. So we all can be affected by that. They can direct us all to do things the way the county government is designed. So, other than that, I think of anything else. If I do, I will send something out. So.
Sounds perfect. Yes. Okay. Yes. Another comment.
I have a question again. We live in a place. They go to the water.
It depends on the intensity. If it's a full scale, big ordinance change like we did with the floodplain this year, as well as with the wind, it would. But typically, the Sioux City Journal, when it comes to the variance level or the conditional use level.
There are a lot of people that rural area.
Area towns. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, do we have anything else? Everybody's putting their pens and packages away. I'm guessing that's a
to adjourn.
Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn. We have a second. You all in favor, say. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your information, comments, and your participation.